Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today, I'm speaking with Kate Berkey. She is a writer, speaker, and missionary living on the north side of Chicago, where she works with refugees and immigrants with Devon Oasis Ministry. She's passionate about helping people, especially women, discover the heart of the Father and live courageously because of who He is and who He says that they are. She and her co-author recently published their first book, A Place Called Braverly, A Dare to Live Courageously, Dream Boldly, and Influence Bravery. Kate is all about family and deeply desires to help others find belonging in the family of the kingdom of God. And more than anything else, she longs to walk women home to the heart of the Father. Love that. Their creator and sustainer. Kate is a lover of being on the water, running on Lakefront Trail, and gathering dear friends around the table. A woman after my own heart. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you, Amanda.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this. Every single time I get to do one of these episodes, I get a pre-recording call to get to know one another, and then the actual recording time. And some people are just immediate friends, and you feel that way.
Oh, yeah. I felt the exact same way.
Yeah. So I'm so eager to share your story with others so that they can see the beautiful story of God in your life. It's amazing. Now, I like to do things a little bit differently. I like to start at the beginning. I think it makes it so much easier for us to see the thread of God working in our lives. And every life story is different, but that thread and the way that God reacts to us and loves us and takes care of us and provides for us, that's always the same. And it really seems to help people see more about His character, I think, when we start at the beginning. And some people are really encouraged when they stop to do that. So I don't think we do that often in our life. We're all so busy. They're encouraged by their own story. And I know I am when I take the time to do it. So would you be willing to go back and tell us a little about your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in rural northern Indiana. I was raised among Amish and conservative Mennonite. Just those faiths
Mhm.
really informed just my hometown. My family is not Amish or conservative Mennonite at all, but I went to school with had many Amish friends. Just grew up in a very conservative, small, quiet town, which for me was awesome because I grew up in the country, got to experience just the beauty of a ton of open space and
Mhm.
yard. I live in Chicago now, so I realize how beautiful a yard is. You
Yeah,
don't
I
realize
bet.
those things until it's gone. So I grew up in just a really like idyllic small town. I grew up in a Christian family that just truly loved the Lord and was involved in the church even as a little kid. We were one of those families that was at the church whenever the doors were open, which
Hmm.
sometimes as a kid you're like, wow, this is excessive. But
Yeah.
now I realize like, wow, that was just a lot of investment in the time of my parents.
Yeah.
Like now as an adult, I realize, okay, that's very intentional in choosing those times to be with believers and pouring
Yeah.
into kids like that. So I actually decided to follow Jesus at a really young age. I don't remember the exact moment when I asked Jesus into my heart. It was probably like as a 5-year-old. But I
Wow.
do remember the lady who was working in Sunday school.
Hmm.
And I remember being so excited when I told her, like, I followed Jesus, and she's still someone that's in my life, and it's really sweet to share that connection with her. But I definitely grew up in just a really strong Christian environment and family. I'm the youngest of four. I have three older brothers. They're awesome. Definitely as a kid, we had our moments, because what siblings don't have their moments
Yeah,
of just pure
absolutely.
terrorizing each other.
Yeah.
um, but they are just, even now, they are just some of the most important people in my life. So I truly mean it when I say I'm all about family. I'm about my immediate family, but also just like that bigger family of the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
But I just grew up in such an incredibly loving family, and one that truly, not perfect by any means, but
Mhm.
truly did its best to point me to who Jesus was.
Well, that sounds like an amazing childhood. And honestly, having older brothers, I'm sure, I'm sure you did have your moments. Men and women are so different at a younger age.
Very.
Yeah, and but I'm sure it was probably really nice too. I bet you they watched out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. They're phenomenal. They're amazing. We had so many adventures together.
yeah.
And they did look out for me a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, as you had this amazing foundation that your parents provided for you and your family, as you got to high school, college years, as many people do, you started to have some questions.
Yeah.
And you said your questions were whether your faith was genuine.
Yeah.
Could you share a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that my story is that unique in that way, because I think that all of us, if we have spent, if we grew up in the church,
Hmm.
or grew up in any kind of like religious system, there's a moment where we have to figure out, like, is this faith ours? Is it real? Is it just
Yeah.
something we borrowed from our family? I work in a highly like Muslim neighborhood now, and so many of them grew up Muslim, and then they have to
Hmm.
figure out, like, is this something that they believe? So I'm not sure that it's unique to me, but certainly my story is one, definitely maybe like as a sophomore, junior in high school, just started to ask some hard questions, and maybe for others they weren't hard questions, but for me they felt really hard and really weighty, and just like, is the Bible true? Like, can I trust it?
Yeah.
Is Jesus really who the Bible says he is? Like, is all of this just a bunch of like made up things to make us feel better about our lives? Like, just dealing with some hard questions, and
Yeah.
also dealing with the just the insecurity and fear of, hey, is it okay that I'm asking these questions? Because
Hmm.
I see a lot of people around me that aren't asking those, or that at least I don't outwardly see them asking it. So I definitely went through a lot of internally asking those questions and holding it in, and thankfully, like, probably, I don't know, maybe like 6 months into this journey with the Lord, I had a mentor that I could really open up to and share these questions with. But it was truly like years of asking hard
Yeah.
questions, and facing doubts, and just wondering, like, man, is all of this that my life is built on? Because my life was built on my faith. Just asking, like, is that all real? And can I trust it? And is it strong enough to be a foundation for my life? Because that's
Yeah.
what I understood Christianity to be something that was just the foundation of our lives, not just this thing that we did on Sundays,
Yeah.
but something that was supposed to be our life. And so definitely my story is one of just asking those questions, really hard questions, and not knowing how to find the answers for them, right? Because some of it is just faith, and some of it is finding answers to the
Yeah.
questions that we have, but some of it is like his faith and those experiences with the Lord. And so it was a lot of years of asking hard questions.
Yeah, and you know what? I do think everyone goes through that to some extent, but I love that God allows us to question,
Yeah.
that He puts people in our lives to help us, that kind of point us towards Him or His truth. And as you were talking, I was thinking about when Joshua wrestled with God, and how God will take us and he'll wrestle, he'll let
Mhm.
us wrestle out our answers, and he'll be there. And when we step out of that, we're never the same again. He
Yeah.
touched his hip, he didn't walk the same, but also he gave him a new name.
Yeah.
And names are really important to God. And so that's what he was giving me an image of while you were talking, that you were wrestling it out with him, but he was in the midst of changing you for use for his kingdom, making sure that you knew who he was, that you didn't forget, and he was giving you a new name. And I think
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. I think that is something that is so incredible about like my story. And I know so many others that, and there was a lot of wrestling through some hard questions, but
Mhm.
there was a point where I did feel very alone in it. And I was like, God is not here in the middle of this, and this is not
Yeah.
okay. But I remember as time went on, I do remember feeling like, you know what? There's freedom to ask these questions, and there's actually a lot of yeah, joy almost to ask these
Hmm.
questions, because I don't think that the Lord is scared by them. I think that he like almost welcomes them and welcomes like our questions and our doubts,
He does.
and
He
he makes
does.
space for that, and there's like
Hmm.
there's safety in that. I think I felt so
Yeah.
afraid and so unsafe because it was like almost like the foundation, like there was an earthquake and the foundation was starting to shake. But
Hmm.
truly, like what was shaking away was like maybe shallow beliefs that I had, or things that I just held on to because like
Yeah.
this is what I was taught a long time ago, and what remained was something that's going to last a lot longer. And there's so much beauty in that and safety in the middle of things shaking, which is crazy.
Yeah. No, but that's powerful. That's a powerful thing. We should put a pin right there, because that's exactly what God does.
Yeah.
He shakes out of us the things that have stuck, that aren't truth. They're not our faith. They're not our belief. And sometimes, it's good things, but they came from someone else. He wants to establish a real relationship with us, and our faith needs to be our own. And we need to know who he is. And I think in the shaking is when we find that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you ended up going to a Christian college.
Yeah.
Were you involved when you got there, or did these questions kind of keep you from connecting at that time?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I went from public school, but in a very like Christian community. So
Hmm.
it wasn't like intensely public, I guess, if you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It still had a lot of like Christian values within the public school, but I do remember the weird culture shock of going from public school to this private Christian school. And now I love the university that I got to go to, but it took a minute for me to kind of to actually enjoy it, because I got there and it was like everyone was a Christian and they were all really intense about it. And I was
Hmm.
going through a lot of questions and doubts. And so it was hard. It was really hard for me to transition, and I wasn't expecting that. Um,
Yeah.
I do remember, so the school that I went to Taylor University, which I love, but they have optional chapel. And so we weren't required to go to it. It
Hmm.
was just something that they felt like, okay, if this is something you value, then you'll go to it and you'll own it more. But we're not going to force you to go to it. And I
Hmm.
remember my freshman year of college, I probably went, I mean, I don't want to exaggerate, but I probably only went like 5 times out of the year. Like I couldn't go. I was really struggling to
Hmm.
be in that environment and feel like, is this real? Like all of this feels really fake and really religious, and I don't want it.
Hmm.
And I was going through my own questions and doubts at the time. But I remember I had a friend, her name was also Kate, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And she just very lovingly came to me one day, kind of out of the blue, and like without judgment, without any like condemnation, she was like, "Hey, Kate, I've noticed that like, you don't come to chapel. Like, what's
Mm.
going on? Are you okay?
Hmm.
Like, is this something that you just don't want to be a part of? Like, tell me what's going on." And it's wild. Like, there's so many things that happen in our lives, but that is something that I will always remember, because it was a friend that wasn't trying to get me on board with something that I wasn't on board with. It
Hmm.
was a friend
Yeah.
that was like, "Hey, I'm kind of worried about you. This is something that we do as a community, as a believers. You just seem a little disconnected. Are you doing okay?"
Yeah.
And that was like a really big turning point for me in the years towards the end of the year. But I started going really just out of respect for her. And it was from that just the love of this of Jesus like flooded back
Mm.
into me in a major way. And I'm so grateful for that friend who reached out and just said like, "Are you doing okay?" Like, no
Yeah.
condemnation, no judgment. Like, you seem like you're struggling. What's going on? But it took me a minute at that Christian school to actually get involved and to feel like it was real for myself.
Yeah, yeah, it was a transition. And I love that she was intentional and she came to you in relationship, not in
Yeah.
religion, because that was what allowed her to be the arrow to help you look back at God and to be more open when you went to chapel, to whatever he was saying to you and how he was meeting you. And it sounds like you met him in your search. And again, I'm
Yeah.
seeing that same, I'm seeing, that wrestling at the water. If you remember that story, to go further, he was afraid to meet up with his brother. He was afraid
Yeah.
because of things he had done in his past, but
Yeah.
who God sent forward was this person with a new name. So, I think we really do. We struggle with so many things that they're like running in the background as if we were a computer and we don't see them on the screen, and they're still there and they're very powerful. So I love that she reached out to you in relationship and
Yeah.
that moved you forward.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk about something you shared with me during our pre-recording call about an experience that you had in high school. You had told me that everyone was gone, but when you got home, there was food on the table. You said it was like a movie, like no people, but all the stuff was left out. Um, what happened? Why had everyone left in such a hurry? And how did that make you feel? Why is that something that came up, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I think I was a sophomore in high school. It was the
Hmm.
days before cell phones like were really, really popular, I guess. And I didn't have one yet. And so my family had no way to reach out to me. I was with actually my co-author. She was my mentor in high school. We were out together and she dropped me off at home. And like you said, I walked in the front door, and my family always ate dinner together, but when I walked in, there was still all of the food on the table, but no one
Wow.
was there. It was a ghost town. And it was just that moment where like everything just sinks and you're like, something's wrong here. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was like a scene from a movie. Like I remember walking over to the table, then looking over, like, where is everyone? And like the days of answering machines, we had a
Yeah.
home phone. It was blinking like, okay, somebody's left a message. Let's go listen to it. And it was my mom, just saying like, I need you to call me right away. Your brother's been in a really bad accident. I'm at the hospital right now.
Oh, wow.
Please call me. And it was terrifying. I didn't realize at the time necessarily, but that had been such a huge fear of mine.
Hmm.
Was just this idea that I would come home one day and someone in my family would have gone through a really traumatic thing like a car accident, and I would have
Hmm.
no way of knowing until it had happened, and I had no control over anything. Like, that was just a really big fear of mine. And my brother had been in just a terrible accident. He had been T-boned. He was in like a really old, like a 1970 something Volkswagen Beetle, so there's no airbags, there's no nothing.
Yeah.
And the car, like, it was really like a traumatic accident. Like, he and his girlfriend at the time, they ended up walking away from it. They were okay, but not after going to the hospital and having all of that.
Hmm.
Um, just that panic of family going there and just, is everyone okay? Not sure. And so that's what happened, and it just brought up all of that fear inside
Yeah.
of me, and all of that, like, okay, God, like, are you here in this? Like, what's going on right now? What am I supposed to do? I can't drive right now. I can't get to my family.
Yeah.
And so I remember actually even waiting at home for anyone to come home at the end of the night, and just being so worried because I didn't have a way to like text. We didn't have a way to text. It was only phone
Yeah.
calls, all of that. So
Yeah.
it was just a really scary, very scary experience that ended up being okay. He ended up walking away, but it was really terrifying in the moment.
Yeah. And that's a very specific fear that you had. And, so here it's almost like something's pressing on this fear that you have that ended up being based on something when we talked in our pre-recording call that you had never really put together. You had said you'd always been afraid you would come home and find something like this happening. And when I asked you why, you said you didn't know. But as we talked, you remembered that as a young child, you had a cousin that had died in a car accident.
Yeah.
And that even though you were young, and I'm sure your family tried to shield you from what was going on, you heard the talking and it resonated and it stayed there. And so I think just as we were talking about God allowing certain things to spill out and fall off, he was trying to show you that there was this fear there that needed to be broken.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I was really young when this happened to my cousin, but when something traumatic like that happens, when because he died just suddenly.
Yeah.
He was at church with my family, with my aunt and uncle, and then he was like, "Oh, I need to run home and grab this thing." So he ran home, and it was like on that journey home
Yeah.
that he got into an accident and died. So it was really sudden, really traumatic, and so the stories from that
Hmm.
they live on. And so I don't remember a lot of the in the moment experience with my cousin, but I remember all of the stories that get told even still today, to just
Yeah.
keep his memory alive, or just the
Yeah.
trauma of that experience. And so it was wild for me to make that connection.
Hmm.
Even in our pre-recording, I will say I was not expecting to make that connection, but it makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
Just that deeply rooted fear, it really did come from just all of the stories that I had heard, and all of those intense, just that
Hmm.
grief and that loss.
Yeah.
And that sticks with people. That sticks with
It
people
does.
throughout their lifetime, depending on just how they work through that pain and that grief.
That's right. And that just shows what a good father we have and how God works. Because, yes, you used the word root. That was deeply rooted. Like, you don't really remember much about it. And first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss,
Yeah.
for your family. But it's something that's already tenuous and scary to anyone, when what happens when we die? When will I die? How will, that something can happen in an instant and all of life can change. That's something that already weighs on every single person. It's just part of the human experience. But
Right.
then to be so young and see the emotions of the people around you, hear these things and have it kind of settle in your heart, but really not know how to deal with it. And I'm sure at the time, if your parents would have realized how you felt, they would have sat and tried to talk with you in an age appropriate way, but they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember back when 9/11 happened, my son was really little. And when everything was happening, we turned off the TVs. We, tried not to talk about it because he was so young. We were trying to keep him, from being traumatized as much as possible. And I
Yeah.
remember he went to preschool and I picked him up. And I think I told you this in the pre recording call, but it's coming to mind again. And I picked him up, and on the way home from preschool, he said, "You know what, Mom?" And I said, "What, Jackson?" And he said, "Do you know that there are dead people like under the rocks in the buildings?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Wait, whoa. And what are you talking about, buddy?" And he started to tell me, "Hey, I heard that people died and this and that." And I sat him down when we got home and explained the best I could in an age appropriate way that what had happened, and that if he ever was worried about something or scared about something or needed answers, that he could come to us and he could always talk to us about it, which is what I think he was trying to do, because this
Yeah.
was an overwhelming thing. But had he not, he may have sat with a fear his whole life. And so we had tried to avoid it, but yet all the moms, and teachers were probably talking
Yeah.
when they came to pick up the kids, because it was such a traumatic time for everyone. And so
It
I
was.
love the fact that God knows your heart, right? And he knew that was in there, and he wanted to shake that out and drop it
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is beautiful to see just how he worked and how he how he did that and made that connection for me. It's
Yeah, so
incredible.
intentional, so detailed. But he also, I love watching how God works in our lives because he won't inundate us with things. He'll do one thing at a time, one layer at a time, one thing at a time. He's gentle and kind and understands to do it all at once would be too much. But
Yeah.
we have to also want him to work. We have to
Yeah.
come to him and say, hey, something's not right, or where do I start, or what do you need to tell me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you're a writer, and you've always been drawn to writing, you said. Eh,
Yes.
How did that work in your life? Like, what are some memories you have of writing?
Oh man, I I really loved school, so I was kind of a nerd in general. Um, but I have so many memories of writing the silliest like short stories that little kids can write and like
Hmm.
the simplest sentences, but I just loved it. I loved writing stories and my imagination would run wild all the time as a kid. And I remember having a teacher when I was in the third grade, and I think I was working on some kind of writing assignment for her, and it was just a little seed that she gave me that said, "Hey, you're really good at writing, Kate. Like, just
Hmm.
keep doing it."
Yeah.
And I like still remember that. I still remember that she encouraged that in me. And it was something that I already enjoyed. And I kind of wondered, like, ooh, am I kind of good at this? Because I really like it.
Yeah.
And then I had a teacher encourage that in me. And so from the moment, I mean, I've really enjoyed it, but definitely from that moment as a third grader, I remember thinking like, oh, I want to do this forever. And that kind of grew into what it is today. And even in high school, I was just remembering the other day that, like in high school, you have all these different periods and things like that. And I had a free period and I did an independent study with one of my English teachers. And during that independent study, I would sit in the library and I would just write. And so I wrote
Mm.
like my first fictional book in that time. I would just sit in the back and I would write for like a straight hour. And I love writing. I love piecing together stories and ideas. I don't do fictional writing anymore, but um, I love bringing in deeper concepts
Yeah.
into writing because I think that you can convey so much through story, through
Yeah.
just the written word, and I love that. I love trying to figure out how to convey an idea that sparks somebody's thoughts, but also
Hmm.
stirs their emotions as well, not in a manipulative way, but I
Yeah.
love to engage all of that in people, and I think you can do that through writing in an incredible way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm listening to you, I'm over here smiling because that's the way I feel about writing. And my mom one time gave me, we were cleaning some things out, and it was this little stapled together book where I had drawn the cover and drawn the pictures and written everything out. And it was by Amanda and, the whole deal, and
Oh,
stapled it together. And I still have it. It's just like this tangible proof that those memories are real.
yeah.
Um, sometimes I think I wonder, like, was that real, or but I always loved it as well. And I think it's so important. I think God affirms, just like through that teacher and other ways, that
Yeah.
the things that we love to do are things that he gave us to do, knowing we would love them. And he gave us talent so that we could use them. And a storyteller is a storyteller is a storyteller. You'll find every way you can, whatever platform, whatever way, whatever vehicle, to tell a story, because that's kind of how our mind works. We want
Yeah.
to share.
Yeah.
And I personally love to take and have God show me things in his word that maybe I've never heard before, or expressed through everyday moments in his creation, things about his character. And it's just such a joy. So I get it. It's amazing to be able to articulate something and get somebody else to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's also a challenge, and sometimes
Yes.
it's not easy. Sometimes it just flows, and other times it's not easy. So,
100%.
after college, you ended up working at your church, and you told me that you felt like God was speaking to you about moving to Thailand, which is also very specific. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always had a heart for the nations. And
Hmm.
I've always wanted to bring, always, I say that like from the day I was born, but definitely like as I grew up and developed
Hmm.
those passions and discovered some gifts that the Lord had given me, I'd wanted to merge this idea of the nations and reaching people and sharing just joy and love and Jesus with them, and
Hmm.
also writing. And I wanted to bring those two together. So I had a couple of friends that were in Thailand at the time when I was working at the church, and they were working with a group on the border of Thailand and Burma, a
Hmm.
ministry there. And just the work that they were doing with the women at a specific training center there, it just grabbed my heart. And I loved what they were doing. I love that they were pouring into these women, that they were trying to help lift these women and lift families out of the cycles of poverty. And that's just something that grabs that part of my heart that longs for justice and longs for
Yeah.
just things to be made right. And at the same time, I just had this question starting to brew in my heart of like, I wonder if they need a writer. Who doesn't need a writer? Like everyone has things they're trying to communicate. Maybe they need somebody. And so it was at that time, I think in 2017-ish,
Hmm.
that I started to explore that idea. Okay, like what could it look like
Yeah.
to move to Thailand to work with his organization? And what if they needed a writer? That would be amazing. And it was just these like inklings of questions and that what if, that I think
Hmm.
sparks so much in our life if we're just willing to explore it, that what if
Hmm.
question,
Yeah.
that could lead to some amazing things.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you're talking about affirmation. At the same time that you're wanting to write and wanting to go there, your friends in Thailand actually had a project idea
Yeah.
and they needed a writer. So, want to talk about like being sure, not needing to put out a fleece that God is working. I mean, that's miraculous. That's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was that same moment that I was asking what if they needed a
Hmm.
writer. At that same
Hmm.
moment, they were asking, okay, we have this writing project we want to do. What if Kate would be willing to come out and do it? And we sort of accidentally discovered that the other person or the other group was asking those same what if questions. And
Hmm.
there's just never been a clearer moment for me in my life. It was like, oh, okay, this is the Lord working. Got it. Cool. All right.
Yeah,
I better be obedient and take some steps here because
yeah.
this is definitely the Lord working. It's never been clearer.
It's amazing. It really is. And so you did go
Yes.
and you served at Braverly with your friend Christy, who had moved to Thailand 2 years before you. And she had founded Braverly along with another young woman, Kayla.
Yeah.
Um, so you wrote a book after serving there. How did God orchestrate it all? What kind of was the process like?
Yeah. So when I went over to Thailand, I almost got commissioned to do this project in kind of a way that you'd commission like an artist to do a painting or something like that. And
Uh-huh.
and my friends, Christy and Kayla, they had such a vague idea of what they wanted this book to look like. It was just it was this vision was laid before us from the Lord, but it was so vague. It was blurry and it was just
Hmm.
starting to come into focus. But we
Hmm.
wanted something that we could use in discipleship at Braverly with the women that we get to work with there at the training center. But then we also wanted something that we could use in ministry no matter where we were. So we wanted it to translate across cultures and languages. And so
Yeah.
a place called Braverly, the book that we wrote, eventually came from that. It was a process of starting to write something and then discovering like, yeah, this is not it. And then
Hmm.
wading into another area and thinking like, okay, I think this is it, but I think it needs refined. I think that's so much of writing a book is wading into it and then realizing like, wait, hold on, we need to like change this or we need to refine it a little bit. But eventually the book was everything, and it was just inspired by the motto of the training center, the mission of it, which is
Hmm.
live brave, dream bravely, and influence bravery. And what that looks like at Braverly is just every time we work with the women there, we're trying to instill confidence, we're trying to instill courage, we're
Yeah.
trying to instill just these attributes of the Father that he gives to us, and he calls us courageous, he calls us to be strong, to walk confidently in him. And so we try to instill that in our own lives and in the lives of the women that we get to work with. But that idea is something that we all need. We all need
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
remember that the Lord
Yeah.
calls us courageous, and that that's not a courage that we need to manufacture on our own. It's something that we get from him. And so the
That's
book
right.
came from that place. But it was a process. It was a long process of writing and rewriting.
Hmm.
I remember in May of 2019, I was supposed to move back. I was supposed to go back to the States in July, and in May we had pretty much a first rough draft done.
Hmm.
And Christy and I looked at it, and we spent time with the Lord, and we both were like, "This isn't it." And so we
Yeah.
scrapped it. We scrapped most of it, because we just knew, like, this isn't the direction the Lord wants to take this book. And it was a lot of faith to scrap it and to start almost from square one. Not quite. We had a few
Hmm.
chapters we could hold on to,
Hmm.
but it was quite the process. And I think that the book we ended up with is imperfect, but like it is what the Lord wanted to say, because nothing is ever going to be perfect. But
Yeah, but I
I think it's what we
recognize
needed.
I recognize you just kept going back to God and checking in with each other. And when you said God gave you a vision, I wrote this down, but it was blurry. And you talked about the process. It reminded me of when you go to get your eyes checked and you need
Mm-hmm.
glasses, and they keep putting this different lens in. How about now? Nope. How about now? Better or worse? And it keeps going until it comes to a place where you're really in focus and you can actually read everything and they found just the right thing. And that's
Yes.
the vision I just got of the process. And so yes, nothing's perfect. We shouldn't need glasses at all, but we do. And
100%.
yeah, and that process though only works when you keep going back to God and you keep checking in. It
Yeah.
even reminds me of when David would check in with God, right? Okay, I'm going to go up against the Philistines. What should I
Mm-hmm.
do? And God would give him a plan. And he didn't. The next day, it was pretty much the next chapter, he was going up against them again, and he didn't just do what he did the first time. He checked in again, and God gave him a
Yeah.
different strategy. So it's so important that y'all did that, because that's how I think we get to work with God, is like he
Yeah.
wants the relationship and the sitting with him to be a part of the process of this end product that he has for us to do. And it's such a joy that we even get to do it.
Yeah.
But if we do it without him, it's just wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, for us in Thailand, as we were doing this book, and I think this translates to anybody that's trying to follow the Lord. I think checking in with him too and having that relationship, it also reminds us that we are so dependent on him.
Hmm.
We could
Yeah.
have written whatever we wanted in this book, right? But we truly needed him to show up. We didn't want it to be our words and our ideas. We wanted it
Yeah.
to be his, and that requires
Amen.
such dependency. And
Yeah.
so going back to him again and again and again, it's that relationship, and it's also just like, again, reminding ourselves that we're not in control and we need him. We need him to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And he receives the glory this way,
Yep.
and do we want to be sharing any vision that isn't the vision he's asking us to share?
Right. Yep.
um, I think we can get caught up in, well, this is really good, or this sounds catchy, or I love this tagline, or whatever. But honestly, when you sit down to write, it's right after you've sat at the feet of Jesus,
Yep.
or right after God shows you something you never saw before. If you're sitting and writing, then what you're sharing is you're just being a mouthpiece for him.
Yeah.
And I love that you said, like, we don't want people to kind of see who we were. We want to see who he is. And
Yeah.
so that's my desire too. I just want to be an arrow. I
Yep.
just want to point to him. And I hear that in you. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think when somebody is able to get to that place where they let God clean them out, let that stuff drop off, let it shake up, be a clean vessel, he could pick you up and use you to pour out whatever he has to say. And
Yeah.
and he's going to keep using you as long as you stay in relationship. And that's
Yep.
That's just the way that he is.
Yeah.
Now, you returned. I guess it wasn't both of you. Just you returned to the States in May, right?
Yes.
And your book launched in June, which is like really short time. So, what was that like for you? And I also believe something else happened in May. What
Yes.
else was going on?
I know there's a lot going on. So I actually returned from Thailand in February of 2020. So the
Okay.
timeline, it was actually earlier. But the book did launch in June of 2022. So
Okay.
from 2020 to 2022, we were like editing and figuring out publishing all of that stuff. But yeah, the book launched in June. I've never done a book launch before, so it was quite the learning experience. And it was super exciting. It's definitely been just a process of figuring out publishing and things like that. But in May, literally a month before the book launched, my husband and I got married. So it has been quite a whirlwind of the last 5 months have just been
Wow.
wild. Being newlywed, just launching a book, our first book. So it's been quite a bit. It's starting to settle down a little bit. My husband and I are starting to get into a routine a little bit more in our lives. So
Yeah.
we're starting to navigate it. I am starting to navigate it a little better.
Yeah.
But it's been quite a couple of months. There's been a lot and like just a really steep, sharp learning curve in so many areas.
Yeah, that's a lot of new all at
Yeah.
one time. Yeah. So tell us about your husband. I love to hear about how people met their spouses, kind of how they're a team together for God, even though they're doing individual things that are different.
Yeah. So my husband and I, we are a story of online dating. We met through the app Hinge here in
Uh-huh.
Chicago.
Uh-huh.
I had been on the app trying to just meet anyone because I moved to Chicago in 2020, which was just a rough time for all of us. And
Yeah.
so we met in October of 2020. And he actually works in IT. He was working at Moody Church downtown in Chicago, and
Hmm.
I work up on the north side with the ministry up here. And so we met through online dating, which I told some people that in my family, and they were like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." But I know that so many people have that as part of their story now. It's become so normal.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially Christians. It seems like, that you're not really wanting to go out to bars and some of the other
Yeah.
things to meet people. And actually my daughter met my son-in-law online and
Yeah.
they have a beautiful, wonderful marriage. I say whatever works.
Yes. I know.
Yeah,
That's kind of where I'm at.
that's awesome. So yeah, so what are you guys like as a team? Like how does he help you in all that you're doing and how do you help him?
Yeah, so he has a full-time job in IT, and I
Hmm.
am doing essentially full-time ministry, whether it's through writing or through the work that I'm doing with refugees and immigrants here in the city.
Hmm.
But he he is just an absolute rock for me, and is just so supportive.
That's awesome.
My schedule is wild. I mean, last week I had a day that was like 12 or 13 hours long. It was just a really long day.
Wow.
And he is he is my person. At the end of the day, I can come home. There's food for me, like things like that. That's just like, wow, I'm so hungry. Thank you so much for having food.
Yeah.
And just somebody that I can come home and crash with. And he
Yeah.
also, even this last weekend, we met a family in the neighborhood. We met them at a restaurant, and the husband of this family loves my husband, and so Luke came with us and was with this family, and it was such a sweet time of connecting with a family
Mm.
that I've been trying to reach for 2.5 years now. And so we have learned, we're starting to learn this dance
Mhm.
together of ministry and marriage and how to support one another and what the
Yeah,
other needs. He's definitely supporting just this calling right now that I have in so many ways. And I'm trying to
that's
do the same
awesome.
for him.
Yeah,
But it's definitely one of those seasons that feels a little bit more like he is pouring so much to help support me in this. And that has been incredible.
that's awesome. Now you do urban ministry.
Yeah.
You're serving the poor, the refugees, and immigrants in your area. you said that you're helping with teaching English, like things like food and blankets,
Yep.
discipleship. I mean, it sounds really amazing. And I love that he can come alongside you in that because I do think family and community is very important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
awesome. Now, you and I have been talking about your book and then the people that you're serving, and you had said that you're trying to translate the book into Thai and Burmese. I had asked you, had you ever considered translating it into anything else because of some of the people that you work with in everyday life? Tell us a bit about translation and what you're doing.
Yeah. So the original heart behind this book, like I said in the beginning, was to use it at Braverly and in the communities that we have partners in
Hmm.
Thailand and Burma. And so that's why Thai and Burmese was such a big
Yeah.
heartbeat of ours. And actually, Karen, it's a tribal language from Burma and Thailand. And so
Okay.
we're also trying to translate it into that language right now. But now I'm in this city in Chicago, or in this neighborhood in Chicago, and
Hmm.
it's one of the most diverse neighborhoods, at least in the Midwest. Definitely the most diverse in the Midwest, and
Yeah.
there's so many languages here. And what's wild is that Burmese is actually one of the languages that's spoken um, very, very consistently in this neighborhood. And there's a few
Wow.
other like Rohingya or Urdu or Hindi. And I would absolutely love to explore that option of translating into the book into those languages as well, because at this message, it calls people to the Father, it calls them to truth, and it can be translated in their own language. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. And so that's definitely a long goal,
Yeah.
I guess, just a dream there.
Yeah.
And we'll see what the Lord does in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, going to be praying about that because
Yeah.
immediately when you told me about it, it was the very first thing that I saw God connect together. So I'll certainly be praying. Have you ever considered creating a nonprofit for this ministry? Because that would allow you to raise funds for doing some of these translations.
Yeah, I have. That's actually been that idea of a nonprofit has been something that's been on my mind and my heart for actually probably since like 2018, 2019. And it sort
Hmm.
of, as we talked earlier about the vision for the book, it was blurry.
Yeah.
That's what I feel even for this nonprofit is I see a vision ahead, but it
Hmm.
feels very blurry, and every little like I need to take steps forward,
That's right.
and hopefully it will come into focus eventually.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
is how I feel with this idea of a nonprofit or something like that,
Hmm.
that tries to reach women specifically. Like that's so much of my heart, and I would love that, but it's just blurry
Yeah.
right now.
Well, it'll come into focus as all of
Absolutely.
the plans God has for us do. And I love that he kind of gives us step by step because that allows us to depend on him, lean on him, and not
Yeah.
run ahead and do something that we think is good when he has something else planned. You told me that you lead a sewing group for women within some of this community as well. How does that serve to unite you?
Yeah, it's wild. This sewing group that I get to help lead, to me, is a true testament to how the Lord can use us no matter what. If as long as
Yeah.
we are willing and as long as we are obedient in those moments, because I had never sewn before I started this group. But it
Wow.
was just we saw so often, the men go out and they work in this neighborhood, and
Hmm.
then the kids go off to school, but the moms are at home just kind of stuck in their daily routine of cooking and cleaning and doing everything for the family. And they themselves, like their heart and their dream and their passions, that sort of starts to die. And also that community, they long for community. And
Yeah.
so that's such a big need. And so we saw this idea of a sewing group as a way to get women out of the house, to maybe teach them a skill they didn't already know, or to
Yeah.
provide them with the resources to use a gift and a skill that they already have, that they're probably
Hmm.
way more skilled at than I am, and they could teach me, and often they do.
Yeah.
Um, but we have this group, and it's incredible. The Let's see, we'll have it today. We had it just last week, and um, there's a core group of probably 4 to 5 women that come, so it's not huge,
Hmm.
but we don't have that many machines, so that's probably a good thing.
Right.
But even within that 4 to 5, we have a woman from Ethiopia, we have a woman from Afghanistan, someone from India, another from
Wow.
Burma. And so even within that, it's this vast array of diversity. But
Hmm.
when they come into the room, they're immediately greeted by hello, like salam alaikum, like a very traditional
Yeah.
greeting, and hugs
Yeah.
all around. Like even if they don't speak the same language, even if they have no cultural like context for each other, it's become this community of women, and it changes every
I
year. There's
love
just
that.
different that come, but it's become this family, and it's so incredible. As we do the sewing projects, I also share a verse from the Bible and just talk about what
Hmm.
what is being talked about in scripture, and maybe bring some clarity to what they think Christians believe, and just plant some seeds of truth in their heart.
Yeah.
But so much of that group is just building that community and having a space where these women can create something and make something for themselves or their family, but they can also experience just the joy of friendship and just the joy of walking
Yeah.
into a space and being greeted with just such excitement, from others. And I think that that is incredible.
It is incredible. I'm over here smiling. I love everything about that. You're being so intentional, intentional community.
Yeah.
there are the people that go out and they scoop people up and they bring them together, and you're one of those people. And it is definitely a gifting, and you can hear your heart for all of this and the joy that it brings you. Another thing that popped in my head when you were saying, well, it's small. God says, do not despise the small beginnings. He rejoices when you have the plumb line in your hand, when you're just beginning.
Yeah.
That makes him very happy. And so I'm sure he's smiling as well. I love the kind of knitting together of the nations. And
Yeah.
um, again, here's another thing where what you're doing using sewing, and as kind of the way to draw everyone in, and create things while you're having this intentional community is wonderful. But somewhere down the line, as the focus comes in, those things that you create can be something that's sold to raise funds for the nonprofit. So there's all these pieces that I'm seeing as I'm looking at the bird's eye view and listening to your story, that I'm sure will come into view. There's so many cool pieces here. um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I love just how welcoming you are. I mean, it's just so clear that that is your desire. All you want to do is show love and outpour love. And you know what? It doesn't matter what language you speak, you can tell when that's what somebody's doing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I think that so many of us are just trying to find where we belong, and we're trying to find belonging.
that's right.
And I know I definitely feel that way in so many instances. And I love that I get the opportunity to extend just a hand of belonging to others. Because
Yeah,
I know that they're probably searching for that. And if they're not, okay, that's fine. But if
yeah,
they are, like, I get to help bring them into belonging, and that's so special.
yeah. That's actually a good book title. Bring them into belonging. I
Oh,
like
that's
that.
good.
It is good. Write it
Man, it
down.
almost writes itself. Come
It
on.
does. Yeah. So I just love your heart for God, and I have this thing I call my back pocket list. Like, there are things that I've had ideas that I know came from God. I've written them down. I've maybe even spent some time with them, but I know they're not for right now. Do you have anything like that, like on the horizon, or are you plate's pretty full with what you're doing?
Oh man, no, I am the same way. I
Yeah.
have those back pocket ideas. The one that I'm
Yeah.
playing with right now a lot. I love to help people tell their stories, and
Mm,
I love to help nonprofits that are trying to change the world. I love helping them tell their stories. And so the one I'm playing with right now is, how can I come alongside nonprofits to help them tell their story, because they are doing incredible work. Like, I think about the work that my team is doing, and there's so many other
hmm.
incredible organizations in our neighborhood alone, and they're doing
Right.
amazing work, and people have no idea. And it's not to just toot their own horn, but it's to help others catch the
That's
vision
right.
and
Yeah.
see what the Father is doing. He's busy at work everywhere, and I
Yeah.
love to help people see hey, do you know what God's doing in this neighborhood? Like, come
Hmm.
see. I love welcoming people into that. So I'm toying with these ideas right now of like, how can I do that? How can I come
Yeah.
alongside others in that?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. And it just definitely lines up with everything about you. So I am sure you're going to be doing something great. And as someone that follows you on social media and has become friends with you, I can't wait to see what you do next.
Oh,
And I'm going to be putting all the links to social media and your book and all that good stuff in the show notes. So everyone, I always mention it at the end, so that people remember to go and look. But you definitely do yourself a favor and follow along and take a look at Kate's book. I also have one more question for you. It's my favorite question. I ask it all the time because I love the answers. I just think they're so good. If you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
oh man. I had an idea and then you asked and I was like, oh, I have another idea. I have so
You
much
can you
advice
can
for my
answer
younger self.
more than one. You can give us two.
I think there's two big things I would say to my younger self. One is don't be so afraid. I was afraid of
Mm,
so many things.
yeah.
So don't give fear as much space in your heart as you give it. And then two, just be confident, just a little more confident
Mm,
today than yesterday. I was definitely a really, really insecure kid who was not, who just didn't, who kept spending so much time comparing myself to others.
mm,
But there's unique gifts that God has given me and each of us. And
that's
so I
right.
would tell myself, walk in confidence and don't give fear as big of a seat as the table as you do.
Well, both of those are equally wise, so I'm glad you shared them both. What great advice. And honestly, if we had time, I could sit and talk to you for another hour,
I
just get
know.
another cup of coffee. This is so great. And I am sure that our listeners are really benefiting from just like you being honest and vulnerable about some of the things you've gone through. I think sometimes I love the fact that we did talk about how the vision was blurry,
Mm,
and how God brings it into focus one step at a time. So I think sometimes people see, um, accomplishments or see somebody up on stage speaking, or they see them leading something or starting something or writing a book, podcast, whatever the case may be, and they think that it's easy and
mm,
they think that it's immediate. And I love for people to be reminded that no, this is a step by step thing.
yeah.
It's brought into fruition when God says it's His timing, and it comes from a journey of loving Him, being loved by Him, and walking along with Him, wanting to spend time with Him. And as you do that, He turns our hearts around, and we're suddenly in a calling.
Yeah.
And I want to just encourage people out there, just keep taking that next step. And if your vision's blurry, that's okay.
Yeah.
It'll come in focus. So I think that's a beautiful part of your story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I'm so grateful to have spent time with you today and to be able to share your story. I hope you have an awesome day.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing to get to be part of this conversation.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.